Good evening. I am Jeremiah Villar from the grade 11 Howard Gardner class. In this podcast, I will be discussing the exchange of communication between teacher May De Leon and grade 10 Jose Rizal in their economics class. I will be discussing the elements of communication in that class, the functions of communication, the features of the effective communication that they had, and the barriers to their communication. Now, first of all, the speaker was more often than not Miss May De Leon, as she was the teacher. And more often than not, the grade 10 students of Jose Rizal were the receivers of the information that she was trying to convey to them in the economics class. And the functions of communication were predominantly control and information dissemination, such as normal in a normal lecture. Control, as she was trying to get them to settle down so that they may be able to intake correctly and effectively intake the information that she was trying to disseminate. Now, while those two were mainly predominant in their communication, so one of the other three also came up, which was social interaction. She used the information that she had so that she would be able to get her students to relate with what she was saying and putting them in situations that they would be in so that they would be able to much more understand. The motivation and emotional expression, not so much, because this is an economics class. Therefore, there shouldn't be any motivation unless you are motivating the students to become economists, and emotional expression due to it being a formal lecture. Next, the features of of effective communication. As the observer, I did not notice anything lacking in the discussion of the grade 11 students with their teacher. I saw all seven of the features of effective communication, although some of them more often than not were not as detailed as others were not as evident as others showed. I would stress that clearness and correctness were very much seen as Miss May De Leon used to be an English teacher. Therefore, she'd have all the more reason to be correct in her discussion, as she used, instead of the pronunciation scarce, she used scarce being the correct pronunciation as said by her. Of course, completeness and conciseness, of course, in any lecture should be seen and evident. In terms of what was lacking, I'd say consideration. Not because you see that as the students were going on, as the class was progressing, we saw that a lot of the examples that she used were more relatable for a much older audience, for people who might be in college. Not to say that the students were incapable of handling the information that was given to them, but seeing the examples, I seem to think, and I seem to think that it is much more appropriate for an older audience so that they may be able to relate with the examples. And therefore, and now we will be discussing the barriers to communication. The barriers of communication would there were not a lot of barriers of communication in this environment. Although I would say that the less predominant barriers were emotional barriers and a lack of confidence. Although in the students that could be seen sometimes. Now, just like the first one that I would like to bring up is the emotional barrier. So, as it showed in the length of the discussion, they did not show any problems with emotional barriers, as such that the teacher was able to entertain the students so that they would be able and open to receive the communication and the information that she was trying to disseminate. And the use of now in the ones that are evident in the students, although not the teacher, was the lack of confidence. Sometimes, especially when the teacher would ask questions, it showed it showed that there was a lack of confidence between the students and the teacher, as some of the students were not sure about the answers to the question that was being asked by Miss May De Leon. Now, another barrier would probably be the use of jargon, or much rather, surely be the use of jargon, because this is an economics class, and was the first time that the grade 10 class had encountered economics. Therefore, there were such terms that the students did not know, although that would be the purpose of the class, to teach them the jargon. Also, I noticed that there was a tendency sometimes, although not a very noisy environment, but um, there were there was small talk among the class, and sometimes that would distract the students from the learning. My recommendations for the class would be, I guess, to use slightly more relatable topics or examples in terms of the class, and how the message or the information be would be communicated. I also suggest that slightly more social interaction would be very nice in the functions. That way, the students would be more comfortable and more open and even more self-confident, so that they may be able to answer. And this is it. This is my podcast for the grade 11 or communications class, discussing the grade 10 economics class, which was held by Miss May De Leon. Thank you.